but I know that when Mama Military wants to, thinks that it's justified, they can ruin your life so many different ways after the fact.
So and when you join the military, you give up your constitutional rights. I mean, that's like part of the contract. You literally lose your First Amendment right to petition the government for redress of grievance or for free speech, or your Fourth Amendment right of privacy. I mean,
and most civilians don't know. Most civilians don't know or understand that when you are on trial in the military, when they charge you, you are guilty.
Until proven innocent.
Until proven innocent.
It's like the Napoleonic Code. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and so that's something, if you participated in it and you're a member of the military, you really should have thought this one out a little bit better.
Yeah.
I really think, you had the training that lets you know what to expect, so, good luck with you.
Yeah, I'm with you. Mike, thanks for the call. Mark in Philadelphia. Mark, we have a little less than a minute. You got a quick point or question?
Yeah, let me get your legal opinion on something. For 4 years, we heard from Trump and his friends about the attack on religious liberty.
Okay.
Well, whose religion? Suppose you're an atheist. Isn't atheism a religion, or Darwinism, or agnosticism, or religions that believe in dinosaurs that were here 500 million years ago?
This is where the Church of Satan has actually been doing some really cool stuff. We had them on this show a couple of years ago. They were saying they were being discriminated against. Your point is well made, Mark. And, they're trying to create this white Christian.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code Tom. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Marx, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Rob.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Thursday. There's a lot in the news today that we're going to get to. I want to start by talking about fascism in America. We'll get to that in a second. And also in this hour, I want to talk about these. We had an election here in Oregon on Tuesday. You didn't see pictures of people in long lines because the entire state votes by mail. But in any case, 7 Oregon counties have voted to secede from Oregon and join Idaho. And this is actually happening all around the country. I want to talk about that. In our second hour, Professor Richard Wolff, the professor of economics, is going to be here to explain what a weak or strong dollar. There's all this reporting about how basically, you know, Trump was pursuing a strong dollar policy and Biden is pursuing a weak dollar policy. Well, what does that mean? And what does that mean to me or you? How does that affect, you know, everything, prices and everything else? And there is a new coronavirus variant that they literally just discovered this week that has come out of Africa and is popping up in Europe right now. And we'll get into that. And also there's a secondary story relative to that about a new fungal infection that is spreading along with the virus in India. And this is particularly troubling. We'll get into all that in our second hour. In our third hour, Dr. Michael Mann, the world-famous climate scientist, is going to drop by. And we're going to have a conversation about the zombie fires in the Arctic. And, you know, what's the state of our environment right now? Where are we at? Where are we going? How's it going? And also structural racism. I want to get into that a bit in our third hour. So those, you know, that's basically what we're going to talk about and kind of lays out the show for the day. To start out my daily rant over at HartmannReport.com, the headline is "Americans May Only See Fascism in the Rearview Mirror When It's Too Late." And I think probably the main point that I'm making with this op-ed and in what I'm telling you right now is that now that the January 6th Commission looks like it's dead, it passed the House, it's going to the Senate. Mitch McConnell came out yesterday and said, I'm opposed to it, which means that there will be a filibuster of it in the Senate, which means that in order for it to pass in the Senate, they're going to have all 50 Democrats. I think it's reasonable to assume that they'll get that. And they're going to have 10 Republicans. That's going to be a stretch. There are 7, as I recall, Republicans in the Senate who might consider something like this, you know, who have, you know, really spoken out loudly and continuously about their concerns about January 6th, but that's not 10. So we'll see where that goes. But the larger point that I wanted to make is that I think most Americans think that politics changes and moves at a glacial speed. Very, very slow, gradual change is how things happen in countries. This is, you know, I think there's a widespread perception across America that this is the case, even though our own politics, our own history shows that that's very much not the case. In 1773, you had, you know, people in the colonies saying, you know, hey, it's cool to be a British, you know, a citizen of British, you know, an American colonial citizen of the British Empire. Thomas Jefferson himself in 1772 or early 1773 published a whole pamphlet on how to be a good citizen of Great Britain. And then in November of 1773, the Boston Tea Party happened, the Tea Act and then the Boston Ports Act, and it changed everybody's mind. And, you know, within 2 years, we were in a shooting war with England, a limited one, you know, with the shot heard around the world, Arlington, Concord, all that kind of stuff. And by 1776, we had actually declared war on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence. So that all happened in a 3-year period. We went from being, you know, happy colonies of England to we're at war with you guys. You know, the Civil War, the same thing. It was 1857, 56 or 57, that the Republican Party was created in Jackson, Michigan. And you know, ran their first candidate for, the serious candidate for president, Abe Lincoln, in the election of 1860. So that was 3 years later. And boom, Lincoln got elected, and we were in the Civil War within months, you know, of the end of that. You know, the South seceded. That's how rapidly that happened. You had the Great Depression. You know, things seemed to be going along just fine up until 1929, and all of a sudden, boom, you know, the great crash happens in October of 29, and the United States is in a Great Depression, and Franklin Roosevelt comes along to save the day in the election of 1932 and begins the New Deal in March of 1933. And so there, again, about a 4-year period for this huge swing to happen. If you look at countries that flipped fascist, Italy in the 1920s, Germany in the early 1930s, Japan actually in the mid to late 1930s, in every case, it was a relatively short period of time. I mean, Hitler had been arrested in 1923 when he led a group of protesters to the seat of government of Bavaria, one of the southern states in Germany, where, you know, probably one of the most conservative states, if not the most conservative state in Germany to this day. And he led a group of protesters to literally seize control of the state government, to overthrow their equivalent of their governor. He was arrested for that. He was thrown in jail. While in jail, he wrote Mein Kampf. It took him a decade after he came out to spread his idea of fascism, and that the Lügenpresse, the lying press, was behind his imprisonment and was lying about what he was all about, and you know, the Jewish conspiracy and everything else. It took him a decade from the time he was first arrested in Bavaria until he became chancellor in 1933. It was 10 years. And that is being speeded up considerably now. I mean, that was in an era before television. There was radio, but there was no television. And there was certainly no internet or social media. So my point is that what's going on inside the Republican Party right now is the rise of fascism. Trumpism is at its core fascist. And we are seeing this, you know, across the United States. And this movement, fascist movements, are typically not connected to, you know, reality, for lack of a better word. They don't depend on facts. They depend on grievance and a belief that there's an other out there that's trying to screw you, us, you know, that's trying to ruin the country. I mean, that's basically, that's the essence of the whole thing. And that in response to that, you have to have strongman government, you have to essentially suspend the rights of minorities, you have to have strong majority rule, and then, you know, you add to that the call for an ethno-state, you know, a racially pure governing body, essentially, you know, which is what the Republican Party has largely become and is largely promoting. And you have fascism, and it is spreading in the United States really rapidly. And so how do we deal with this? Well, you know, if we're not going to have, at the very least, we need to expose this. And if we're not going to have a commission, a January 6th commission looking into this stuff, then Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer need to get with the program and appoint committees in the House and the Senate that have subpoena power, where every Republican on the committee was one of the Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump or who voted for the January 6th commission. And there are enough in both the House and the Senate to make that happen, to create those committees and begin public exploration and go all the way back to 2015.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, let's look at what was going on inside the Trump campaign and Paul Manafort and his dealings with Russia and other countries and all this stuff. Let's just get into it. And welcome back. Jerry in San Francisco. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was really intrigued by your rant yesterday about what we have to do with Manchin and, like, turning the screws on this guy. And then I think, I don't know, where do you begin to turn the screws on a guy who didn't support Obama in the second term, voted against federal minimum wage, or at least didn't support it, but supported Trump immigration plan, very supportive of Kavanaugh, remove federal funding for Planned Parenthood. I mean, Tom, so when you say turn the screws on him, do you have something in mind? Like, what would it look like? What is that?
No, it's very straightforward.
On board?
It's very straightforward, Jerry. For example, the American Jobs Plan. There's a very good chance that they can get the American Jobs Plan through. The American Jobs Plan is going to pour billions of dollars into West Virginia. So Chuck Schumer has the choice of either saying, okay, Joe, if you're not going to go along with us, then you're only going to get $1 billion. If you do go along with us, you're going to get $5 billion. You're going to have bridges named after you. You're going to have highways named after you. You're going to have buildings named after you. But if you don't go along with us, then we're just going to set you on the outside. We're going to marginalize you. Or, that's probably the crudest example, and that's probably not the very best one for Chuck Schumer to use, because that might cause Joe Manchin to not vote for the American Jobs Act. And if they can pass this thing with reconciliation, they only need 50 votes, so they will need Manchin's vote. But there are a whole bunch of things that Joe Manchin wants and that Joe Manchin will want that Chuck Schumer can offer him or can withhold from him. It's pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, the master of this game back when he was the head of the Senate was Lyndon Johnson.
Right, yeah.
And Mitch McConnell does the same thing on the Republican side regularly.
Yeah, but that's, I just see Manchin having like this escape valve of, he won by 50-point-something% last time he ran for Senate. He might just say, I'll just become a Republican.
I think that's unlikely because the Republican Party is in such chaos right now. I think that might have been the case if Trump had been able to hang on to the White House and the Republican Party had maintained any kind of power in Congress. But I think if he were to leave, he would probably become an independent, but I'd be surprised if he didn't continue to caucus with the Democrats.
Well,
Joe Manchin can get a lot more out of the Democrats. Go ahead.
You made me really think about those. Those were really good points that you just made. So feeling better this morning, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. There's one other thing, too, that Chuck Schumer controls and that Mitch McConnell controls. Mitch McConnell, for example, controls a fund that last year was $47 million. More than half of that came from one dark money donor, but it is the House or the Senate Minority Leaders Political Action Committee. And he brings in this money, roughly $50 million from God only knows who, and then passes that out to senators who are running for re-election. And Chuck Schumer controls a similar fund and can also, be a big help or a big hindrance to Joe Manchin as he's running for election, re-election or anything like that. So there's, there are a lot of ways to either turn the screws or dangle the carrots. And frankly, he needs to be doing both. Jerry, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. 20 minutes past the hour. We will be back with what happened here in Oregon day before yesterday. This is a fascinating story. And what does this mean for the future of America? Right after this. Stick around. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at ThomHartmann.com, I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now. And this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it, and that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land, that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So 7 Oregon counties. This was the day before yesterday. Here in Oregon, we held an election. We got the results last night, or Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. 7 rural Oregon counties have voted in favor of leaving Oregon and joining Idaho. And this includes counties that start at the west end of the state, loop to all the way down to the south end of the state, and all the way out to the ocean, which would basically mean that Idaho would go from the Canadian border all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and Washington State and what would be left of Portland would become this little island, that is separate from, completely separate from California, which is our connection essentially to, the blue West Coast. And, it's pretty strange stuff. 5 counties voted on Tuesday. 2 counties have already voted. So that's 7 counties in total in Oregon that want to join Idaho. Now, it's probably not going to happen. In fact, it's almost certainly not going to happen. It would require both the Oregon legislature to vote to let those counties go and the Idaho legislature to vote to accept them. Now, the Idaho vote is probably likely. The Oregon vote is almost certainly not going to happen, but, you never know. And then, even if it passed both states, it would have to be voted on by the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate. And so I think it's unlikely, but, hey, I'm not counting anything out. I mean, the Republican Party here in Oregon has just gone nuts. Here in Multnomah County, this is, the county that is mostly Portland, the most populous county in the state. On Monday of this week, the Republican Party, the Multnomah County Republican Party, the Portland Republican Party, essentially, which is very much a minority in terms of political power and elected officials and everything else. They basically split into 2 factions. And one faction has the Proud Boys providing security to them, and they are clearly the Trumpist faction, as it were. And the other half, the other faction, is more, I guess, Eisenhower Republicans, big business Republicans, or maybe even kind of crazy right-wing Republicans, but not quite ready to say that they're going to jump into bed with Donald Trump and the Proud Boys. It's fascinating to watch. I'm not sure it's a good thing. I think it's, it may be, because it further diminishes the power of the GOP in many ways. But what it also tells us is, apropos my earlier rant, and this is where, if you have thoughts on what we can do to stop this or expose this or change this or where it's coming from or why it's coming from. But, to my earlier rant, what this suggests to me, what this, I think, says loudly to me, and should to all of us, is that there is this neo-fascist movement. I suppose we could use somewhat softer language and call it an authoritarian movement not just in Oregon, but all across the United States, that is seeking to reorder and reorganize our political systems. You've got now 4 states that have voted to say, you know, doesn't matter who the voters vote for. The state legislature is going to decide who won the election. You've got legislation to that effect introduced into 47 states. And odds are, you know, a half a dozen, maybe a dozen of them will pass it by the 2022 election, which means that they're pre-rigging the election. You've got parts of the country that are voting to merge or separate themselves from individual states. It increasingly appears that the principal divide here now is between rural areas and urban areas. And the suburbs, the suburban areas, are kind of the great battlefield now. And it was the suburbs, in particular the white suburbs, that had been the Republican Party's stronghold. But now as the Republican Party goes more and more, you know, Trump, fascist, conspiracy theory, QAnon, all this kind of stuff, as that increasingly becomes what the Republican Party is and is all about, what we are finding, what we are seeing, sadly, increasingly, is that, you know, they've just gone off in this totally crazed direction, this totally fascist direction. If this experiment of democracy fails in America, it's going to fail around the world. This is a big deal. We were the first democracy in the modern era 240 years ago. And, you know, the whole world, there were only a half a dozen of, you know, democracies by the 1860s, and the whole world held its breath during the Civil War. And now you've got roughly 123 out of 192 nations now call themselves democracies. If America falls to fascism, look out. It's going to happen worldwide.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Stick around.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Arundhati Roy's brilliant book, Capitalism, A Ghost Story. This is from the afterword at the very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified. We have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Liddites, we demand, 1, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations. Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. 2, natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. 3, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. 4, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea and the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a Lidite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. That's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home? A temple to the new India or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about this most expensive dwelling ever built, the 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid. The grass was dry in patches, bits have fallen off in neat rectangles, clearly trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati Roy goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism run amok. Capitalism, a ghost story by Arundhati Roy.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. You know, there's so much news coming out of the Trump administration, so much corruption, so many crimes. Oh, you know, now they're letting them people kill endangered species. Now they're selling off, you know, the Arctic National Wildlife Preserve refuge rather to big oil companies. Oh, now they're they're authorizing pesticides that we know cause birth defects and damage to children. It's just, you know, step after step after step that it's so easy to forget that back in July of 2020, it was reported that Jared Kushner and Mike Pence's nephew, John Pence, created a couple of LLCs, American-Made Media Consultants Corporation. that took $617 million of Trump campaign cash, and nobody knows where it went. I'm telling you, these guys are professional grifters. We need to keep an eye on it. There's a whole rant about it over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. Welcome back. So we're seeing, not only are we seeing the spread of kind of an ethno-nationalism, neo-fascism across the Republican Party, and not only is it seizing geography, but it's also happening within families. You know, do you have and within workplaces and in communities, do you have a neighbor who has turned into a fascist? Do you have a family member who has turned into a fascist? Do you have a friend who has turned into a fascist? What do they say to you? How do they justify this? Or what do you say to them? Have you had any success in awakening them out of this? How do we deal with these cults? What has been your experience? I'd love to hear it. Anyhow, let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Samantha in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Samantha, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good morning, and thank you for being intelligent and being out there with this. You are absolutely 100% correct and accurate in what's coming. We are facing a civil war that is about to engage. There are two very strong factions that are warring against one another, and it's impossible to ignore it, and yet we are ignoring it. We are actually acting as if tra-la-la, everything's just fine, talking about the economy is great and blah, blah, blah. And that's not what's happening. What you just talked about with these people from Oregon wanting to go with Idaho now, and the 47 different states with all the laws that they are putting to suppress our voting, with all of the Proud Boys and the white supremacist groups all coalescing right now and secretly making their little, they have these places where they go and they shoot their guns and they are weaponizing their ideology. We are I went to Dachau several years in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. And the Nazi prison camp near Munich.
Yes,
you're talking about.
Dachau in Germany, and I thought Dachau was one of the biggest, but no, there were 40 of those things there.
Yeah.
And
there were several hundred actually across Germany. Most of them were much smaller, but labor camps, work camps, prison camps.
And
the death camps are outside.
I trembled for days, wondering how could human beings do this to other human beings. Mm-hmm. But if that is a possibility, and then when you research history and you see that human beings have done this to other human beings for centuries, to think that that's not possible here is a huge error.
Yep.
It's a big mistake. This is marching toward us right now as if the Chinese government was marching toward us right now. And we're just tra-la-la. Oh, isn't it a pretty day? I think I'll go ride my bike. And yes, I do that because I have to. But we cannot ignore what is actually getting ready to face us, and we need to be ready for it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you, Samantha. And we need to be the first way to stop it is political. If the political way of stopping it fails, then it becomes more of a physical struggle. And that's something that I don't even frankly want to contemplate, because that's something that looks like a civil war. And we went through that before in this country. The same kinds of forces are pushing another civil war. You've got, the Boogaloo Boys who are openly and proudly proclaiming that they're trying to create a race war, a civil war in the United States based along the lines of race, and other groups saying the same thing. Samantha, I'm with you. I need to move along to another caller, though, but thank you.
I love you. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot,
Tom.
Samantha. Great to hear from you. Anita in San Antonio. Hey, Anita, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I don't think this happened overnight with Trump. I mean, the Republican Party has been chipping away at democracy for a long time.
Yeah, 40 years, basically.
Exactly. They don't like democracy. And I think what happened was a demagogue came who was willing to he was shameless. And also he peeled away some of the left with this kind of populist rhetoric and even some of the anti-immigrant stuff.
Well, and he also lied through his teeth, and a lot of people to this day believe him, that he was going to do what progressive Democrats have been claiming for a long time that they wanted to do. Trump said he was going to raise taxes on the rich. He was going to give everybody a better health care system. He was going to stop offshoring jobs to other countries. He was going to bring those jobs back to the United States. He was going to make, America, once again, a country that the world was proud of. Those were the things that he campaigned on in 2016. By 2020, they were obviously a lie, and I think that's part of why he lost.
He opened up his campaign calling Mexicans rapists.
Yes, you're right.
Anybody after that, that was it for me.
Yeah.
And he started off even before that. I couldn't even look at him because
birtherism.
The birtherism.
And the Central Park Five. I mean, he has a long history of race being the central animating force, I suppose, or issue, in his life. This goes way back.
But that's what these right-wing populists do, right?
Yeah.
And that's how they separate us. And they use this kind of populist language. And if we don't learn, I don't know, we're in trouble anyway. But if we don't learn and we don't start addressing this, and I think Biden's doing a good job.
Yeah.
I think if he can get this infrastructure thing going and with the COVID relief and all the things that he's done already, I don't understand why any Democrat like Joe Manchin or anybody who calls himself a Democrat cannot see what's happening here.
Yeah,
if we don't do these things, we're in big trouble. Look what's happened with the census. We're in trouble. I'm
with you. I'm absolutely with you. And look at what happened with the corruption of all these different federal agencies and, et cetera, et cetera. Anita, spot on. Thank you. It's great to hear from you. Denise in Rocky Gap, Virginia. Hey, Denise, what's on your mind today?
The move from the counties of Oregon wanting to move to Idaho. I live in Virginia, West Virginia line, about a mile from it. We've done this before. West Virginia, when it separated from Virginia, the state of Virginia took West Virginia to court and got back the money for all the developments from the time immemorial of the state of Virginia, and West Virginia had to pay them. It went all the way to the Supreme Court.
When was that?
Yes, it went all the way to the Supreme Court. West Virginia didn't get it paid off until the 1940s, and they wouldn't have done that if they didn't have coal.
Wow.
Which helped them pay for it, and they'd still be paying it now. So
wasn't that split toward the end of the 19th century?
Oregon?
Wasn't that split toward the end of the 19th century?
Yes. Yes, well, the split was after the Civil War.
Right.
They split during the Civil War. And Virginia later on, about the 1890s, I think, decided they wanted West Virginia to pay for all those improvements they'd done in that part of the country.
Interesting.
So the question is how much does Idaho want to pay Oregon for those 7 counties?
That's an interesting question. And Denise, thank you for a little bit of history that I didn't know. That's a marvelous one. Thank you.
Okay.
Great to hear from you. Nikki in Chicago. Hey, Nikki, what's on your mind?
Hi. I just wanted to say, Tom, that I feel very sad that we've lost the Republican Party. I think we need a strong second party, and actually I'd love to see a strong third and fourth party, but I don't think it's a win for the Democrats that we lost the Republicans.
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree with you. This transformation of the Republican Party from a reasonable alternative to the Democrats, which they were up until 1964, into a radical and unreasonable party that embraces racism, fascism, ethno-nationalism, that was kicked off with the Goldwater nomination, but really became real in 1981 with the election of Ronald Reagan, and became explicit in 2016 with the nomination of Donald Trump. After, as previous caller said, his opening speech was, a racist speech. He was, it was just pure racial demagoguery. I think of my dad, who was an Eisenhower Republican and was starting to get uncomfortable by the 2000s, with George W. Bush and all this kind of stuff. He hung on until he died, but I don't, I'm not inside the Republican Party, and I don't know how to bring it back. Do you have any thoughts, Nikki?
Well, no, I don't know how to bring it back because it's based on lunacy, and I don't know how you address that. But I do think that as somebody who at times did agree with things the Republicans said going back to the 60s, that I feel a sense of loss.
Yeah.
I miss the Republican Party. I liked having some debate, and it seems like we can't have that anymore because it's so divided.
Yeah, I'm with you. Nikki, thank you. And I don't have, I wish I did. I've thought about this a lot. Some magic bullet or easy thing that's going to help the Republican Party put themselves back together again. I think they're just going to have to go through this major split. And like I said, we're seeing it in micro here in Multnomah County. In macro, we're seeing it all across the country.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
And I think the question at the end of the day is the Republican Party going to end up being a Trumpist fascist party full on, or are they going to go back to some reasonable positions? And welcome back. Jim in Phoenix, Arizona. Watch us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Okay, I'm from the land of we're still counting the votes, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And it's spreading. They want to do this in Georgia now, and they want to do it in Texas. And it's, the circus.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, the circus. It's like it's becoming like the old carnivals that used to go from town to town. Anyhow, what's up, Jim?
Hey, it's funny you would say circus because I ran a union at Luke Air Force Base, and General Barnum was the head, and Bailey was the head of personnel. So I was against Barnum and Bailey. So it was kind of fun with the Democrats for Republicans. And I got called to Washington because they said, you're losing membership because you don't realize they're mostly Republicans. They signed on for the health care, for the teeth to get fixed, not for what you believe.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that to you. So my friends and the church, they've all failed. I notice a little preacher in you, too, so I might want to say this to you. You live in your body, you're not your body. So let's remember that. And that's causing a lot of confusion with everybody. You want to know how to deal with all these slow-moving people out there that guy was writing about in capitalism, all those ghouls? Well, the way we cover it is with love. We all have that in common. It don't matter about whose God is what. It's about love, and that's what we all want. And we do live in our bodies. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's like Roosevelt. The best thing that's ever been said. Fear is all we got to worry about. And the unknown is good, because when you don't know something, you don't have preconceived notions, and you can take it in and deal with it. I have changed a few of my friends, but they say I'm heavy-handed. But so what?
Yeah. Jim, you do a pretty good rant. And, in fact, you're starting to sound like George Carlin here without the obscenities. But, yeah, I think that, we've all seen people who are flipping in those directions, and we, particularly if they're close to us, we can't stop loving them, but that doesn't mean that we have to interact with them. I mean, have you seen anybody that you were able to shower with love who has said, gee, I don't think I'll be a racist Republican anymore?
No, I haven't. And when I tell them there's no such thing as races, they really freak out. Everybody does. Even reverence. You go, what do you mean, no? I said, read Genesis in your own Bible. It says, I created the human race. That's all it is.
This is where, the official doctrine of the Mormon Church right up until the late 1970s was that, when Cain got expelled from the garden, God put a mark on his forehead so that everybody would recognize him and shun him. And they said that's blackness, right? I mean, that was what Christians used to justify slavery, what they used to justify the doctrine of discovery, what the Seventh-day Adventist Church used to justify its basically whites-only policy until the 1970s. I'm reluctant to refer people to the Bible if I'm trying to tell them not to be racists.
Well, I know I am too. So what I do is I just say creator and love.
Yeah, there you go. Jim, good luck with that. And, I don't mean that sarcastically or dismissively. I mean that genuinely. Good luck with that. And if you have any successes, give me a shout and let us know. Great to hear from you. We'll be right back in just 1 minute. Stick around. It's 49 minutes past the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a while ago at Davos, Michael Dell, the computer billionaire who started out selling computers out of his dorm room in college. I was running CompuServe forums back in the day. This is in the late 70s or the early 80s, and he was selling them on CompuServe in my forums. And, now he's worth billions. And somebody asked him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing a 70% tax bracket for people who make the kind of money you make. What do you think of that? And his response was, a 70% tax rate? Name a country where that ever worked. Ever. And it turns out there is such a country, and apparently Michael Dell didn't know this. I think a lot of Americans don't know this, that there was a country that had its greatest period of prosperity in its entire history, with a top tax rate that was above 70%. In fact, it hit 90% for more than half the time. And that was the United States of America. It's a new video over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And it's like, where do we go with all of this? Morris in Long Beach, California. Hey, Morris, what's on your mind today?
Happy days are here again. My Democrats are making friends. And let me tell you something. I don't know if you ever played chess or not, but, there's in chess, sometimes, there's nothing you can do. If you go this way, you're through. If you go that way, you're through. Well, that's where the Republicans are right now with this January 6th situation regarding the commission. Now, they can vote down this commission if they want to. That might be a bad move. I was listening to this guy, Kurt Cabala, I think he's a congressman, and Tim Ryan, and they got me thinking. If they don't go with the commissions, they're definitely going with the committees.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be Benghazi 2.0. Only it's not going to be Benghazi. It's going to be January 6th. But it's, they had 10 different congressional committees investigate Benghazi, spent tens of millions of dollars, took 4 years to do it. Go ahead.
Talk about stealing a brother's thunder. Now, check this out. Now we're going to get into a conversation of recusing yourself if you're a Ted Cruz, if you're a Josh Hawley. If you're a goddamn Republican. So the best move, in my opinion, is to go with this commission. Go with this commission, because if they get it into committees, if they're concerned about what's happening from 2 years from now, MSNBC, CNN, they're going to have a field day with these guys. Now, of course, your boy Fox News and Newsmax, they will ignore it. They'll have a different slant, different narrative. But MSNBC and CNN, they're going to get paid the same way these guys got paid when Trump was in power, and every day he was turning the country upside down. Yeah. So anyway, happy days are here again. My Democrats are making friends.
There you go.
See you later.
I think it's going to be good theater. Thanks a lot for the call, Morris. Max in Clackamas, Oregon. Hey, Max. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Hey, I don't know. I might be. I'm very open to be convincing about this either way. But my stance, my reaction to the 7 counties wanting to leave the state of Oregon, my first knee-jerk reaction is, you know what? Let them. The way I see it, D.C. is likely to be admitted into statehood soon, so that'll be 2 senators and a Democratic representative in the House. Mm-hmm. Puerto Rico might also be added as a state. That's 2 senators and probably at least 3 or maybe 4 representatives, also Democratic. I know this might be popular, but I really honestly think California ought to be broken up into smaller states, simply for the fact of it seems odd to me that a state with 55 House of Representatives only gets 2 senators, when a state like Rhode Island, barely a state in my opinion, gets 2 senators. Right. And,
Right, or Wyoming, which has even fewer people than Rhode Island. I get what you're saying, Max, right. and I've for a long time said I think California should become 3 states. And the northernmost part, there's a movement to call the northernmost part of California Jefferson and call it a state. And it would be a red state. And then you would have the Bay Area, basically, the central California, and you'd have Southern California. L.A. would be the epicenter of that. And those would both be blue states. And, and frankly, I think that New York City should be separated from New York State and should become its own state. Yes. There's 20 million people there. And or whatever the number is these days, but none of that is going to happen All right, California's not going to split up. Oregon is not going to, peel off parts and give it to Idaho. But what these movements are doing, or at least in particular what this movement is doing here, is it's fueling the fantasies. It's fueling the crazy, and giving.
Why is it crazy? Why will it never happen, and why is it crazy? I guess it would
never happen because it requires both legislatures a majority of both legislatures to vote for it, and a majority of people in both the federal House and the federal Senate to vote for it. And I just don't see that happening. I just, it's too high a bar.
Right. Should it happen, though?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We should reorganize the country. I don't disagree with that at all. But but your point of just let them go on, or is this an exercise in futility, or are they just doing this for PR, or is it essentially political masturbation? I think it is basically. But, I think it's also symptomatic of a larger and more dangerous trend, which is this fantasy thinking that America isn't worth being part of, that, we really do need to separate ourselves, that the divide between rural and urban is, so great that we need geographic divides, as well. And principally that argument boils down to race. The rural areas in America that are talking about separating are almost entirely white. And
well,
go ahead.
I understand that, but I hear that. I mean, when I hear that something is both ought to be done but very difficult to do, as you've said, all that makes me want to do is fight for it more.
Well, that's and that's the challenge that these guys are facing. If they're going to pull off some sort of a secession here from Oregon to merge with Idaho, it's going to take a bigger movement than they have, and it's going to take a more cohesive and coherent Republican Party than they have. But, they did get this thing on the ballot. We've got ballot measures here. But these ballot measures this is not binding. This does not force the state legislature to act. These are really just, these counties saying this is what we would like. So, Max, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Yeah, have a good one. Good to hear from you. Boy, what a day, huh? Okay, coming up, Professor Richard Wolff, how a strong or weak dollar affects all of us. What does this mean, even? And this brand new coronavirus variant out of Africa, this is something we need to be keeping an eye out on, too.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Club's creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
reading today from Warrior Is by Harley and Robin Zephyr. It's the story of their great-grandfather who, in real life, killed Custer at Little Bighorn. And in fact, there's a map of the war, as it were, the battle. And they say that he is now the spirit keeper of Custer, which is remarkable. And there's a page-and-a-half introduction to the book, and then it becomes, a historically accurate novel, basically. This story is the traditional and cultural account of the life of Nikogju Lakota warrior Mato Nyanpi, saved by Bear, which his name in English, also later known as Scarleg. Warrior is based upon a true story. What you are about to read has been told to us through our family, passed down as oral history from generation to generation. Every family has its own story. This is ours. It's up to you to visualize and experience the events described herein in order to determine what you believe or what you choose to accept from what you learn from these pages. You've likely never read a story quite like this before. In Warrior Is, the reader is able to visualize and experience the events and circumstances of Mato Nyanpi's life. Many times the story is told in the present tense, such as if you were walking with Saved by Bear and his people as the events unfold. This was our original manner of storytelling. Other times the story is narrated in the past tense to account for a past perspective. Those of us who may not be entirely fluent in particular words or specific language, as much as we may be fluent in spirit and honest communication, the life messages many times can be more meaningful than just the written or spoken words. Warrior Is follows the timeline from the time of creation, moving through Saved by Bear's birth in 1849, and going up to July 1876, 2 weeks after the Grass Battle. Please exercise your free will and follow your conscience when reading this story. The spiritual side is called upon you to open your spirit so that you may read this tale and learn about these events through your own spirit. And, continues sort of like in that line, but here, right to the book. Prologue. He smelled the yellow of the sun. His spirit was alive and energetic. He felt the energy in his chest and all along the blood running through his veins. He looked to his left to see his great friend by his side. The strong scent of sage caressed his nostrils and reminded him of home. The movement over the high-running hilly ridge to the south caught his eye. He and Swift Bear sensed and felt the pathway opening up. So much had occurred so quickly, so suddenly, so dramatically. Their call to duty, his call to duty, filled his mind, his heart, his spirit. Today, it was meant to happen. It was presented to the people from the Creator. The plan was made. The warriors summoned. The preparation was done. It all led to this place, this portal in time. The sparse clouds to the west resembled mare's tails, and for a brief moment he remembered his white stone friend in the White Mountains. He remembered his spiritual commitment to protect his people, Grandmother Earth, and the sacred Hisapa. And time stood still for a moment, a small moment in time, through all of the ancient and original history of all the moments of time. And as the group of the horse-mounted soldiers rode briskly over the far ridge, the Creator shined that warm, nurturing light upon these warriors. Such as Creator had been doing since the beginning of time, since the beginning of Grandmother Earth and Grandfather Sky, and at the beginning of all things. All the moments of time forever had arrived here, now. It had come to this. Creator's strong will and great invisible hand had placed them here. It was the Creator all along. It always was. It always would be. For one to know what led the young Lakota warriors to be here at this fateful site near the Greasy Grass River on this warm, sun-drenched day, one must go back in time, way back to the beginning, when it was only the Creator, and the Creator of all things decided to create a new world. Her name would be Unsimaka, Grandmother Earth, and she would be created to hold and sustain life. All kinds of beings, all kinds of people would be given and placed upon and within her to show her love of life. And this is how it all began. Chapter 1, Origin. The human beings evolved from the spirit. Before arriving in Wind Cave, we were star people. Many of us came from a place called the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters, an ancient star grouping and constellation that contains worlds comprised of the gift of life-giving water. Water is life. Mini Wiconi. The Pleiadian influence is an absolute, but those of us who claim to be relatives of the Pleiadians share a common bond with other indigenous people, regardless of where we are geographically on the earth. We will always remain Pleiadian star people. Spiritually, we have become human beings of different races and ethnicities, but the origin of our spirit is the water. And for us, and as to who we are, as the tribal people in a family way, our name is Minkoju, its evidence. It means life's subsistence through the gathering and planting by the waters and or river. The Minikoju spend their lives living by the waters. This is something that many of our own people do not know or understand, but this is our history, not only of our physical existence, but also the history of our spiritual existence on Unsimaka. The book is Warrior Is by Robin and Harley Zephyr. In defense of the claim, the competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is our old buddy, Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info, author of numerous books. His most recent, The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. You can also tweet him at Prof. Wolff, W-O-L-F-F, as in Professor Wolff. Professor Wolff, welcome back to the program. I'm curious, I'm reading, you know, throughout the Trump presidency, Trump kept talking about how he wanted a strong dollar, like that's some reflection of a strong America. And now, mostly the Financial Times, but I've also seen reporting about this in both the New York Times and the Washington Post. There are all these articles about how the dollar is weakening, and is this the Biden policy, or is this some new Fed policy, or whatever's going on, you know? And what does all that mean?
Well, it's very important to get the definition clear, since many articles don't do that, and that simply makes it harder for the reader. The basic idea is the following. When you do international trade, when you try to sell American-made goods abroad, or whether you bring foreign-made goods into the country, there has to be a change of currency. French wine is produced by people who use the euro, but if they are consumed here in the United States, then the people who buy the wine have to pay in dollars. So somewhere along the way, in the passage from growing the wine, the grapes in France, and consuming the wine here, there has to be a change of currency. A strong dollar means that the dollar is worth a lot, and you don't get, you do get a lot of euros for a dollar. That's when it's strong. When it's weak, it's the opposite. You have to give a lot of dollars to get a euro. So a strong dollar, here's the economics of it, a strong dollar means that anything produced abroad appears cheaper to Americans because you can get more of the other currency when you exchange dollars for it. A weak dollar is exactly the opposite. It means that foreigners get more dollars for their currency, and therefore goods priced in dollars appear cheaper to them, and they will presumably buy more. What it means in the most practical sense is the following. A weak dollar means foreigners will buy more American goods because they will appear cheaper to them. So if you want to boost exports, make your currency weak. On the other hand, if you want to make it easier for your own citizens to buy foreign goods, then you want a strong currency because it makes the exchange, how many of the foreign currency units you get for a dollar, greater, and therefore it's cheaper for you to buy. So in our country now, because our economy is a problem, it's not so bad for us that the dollar is weak, because that'll see more American goods sold abroad and fewer foreign goods purchased here, because we have to give more dollars, since it's weak, to get the foreign currency. And that's what this is all about. Mostly, these movements are determined by how many foreigners want a dollar In other words, what's the demand and supply of dollars relative to other currency? But sometimes the government can intervene. The Federal Reserve in this country would be the agency that manipulates. That's typically the job of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, manipulates the currency by having the government itself get into the business of buying and selling currencies, which can happen. And finally, it's a policy matter because if the interest rates in the United States are lower than they are in the rest of the world, and that is the case now, well, then nobody wants to keep their money here because the interest rates are low, and so nobody's interested in getting dollars. People who have dollars, American companies, they don't want to keep their money here either because of the low interest rates, so they move their money to, say, a European bank or a Japanese bank, which pays higher interest, and when they do that, they dump the dollars, that's what they say, and buy the other currency, and that'll weaken the U.S. dollar. So think of it as a consequence of what's going on in the world economy that then has its own impact back on that economy.
So why would Donald Trump be promoting a strong dollar? Was it just he doesn't understand all this stuff and he thought strong sounds good? Because that
absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. I know it's mind-boggling, but look, it's a pattern. When he imposed the tariffs on various countries, and particularly China, he said over and over again that he's really sticking it to the Chinese. By putting these tariffs on, the Chinese are going to have to pay. That's false. When you put a tariff, it's just a tax by another name. And it means a tariff against the Chinese goods that an American company, when it brought Chinese goods into this country, would not only have to pay the Chinese, whatever the price of it was in the Chinese currency, but on top of that would have to pay the tariff that Mr. Trump had imposed, and that was money out of the pocket of the American company going to Uncle Sam, to the federal government, like any other tax. So when Mr. Trump kept saying that the Chinese were having to pay for these tariffs, it was the kind of mistake that a freshman in an economics course in college would flunk the exam for writing such a thing. And yet it was amazing not only that he repeated it, but that so many of the press kind of carried it without the corrective that really is so obvious that it means I have to say in answer to your question, Tom, yeah, I don't think he understood it. I think he was talking to people who like to hear that anything about America that is strong is good and anything about America that is weak is bad. And unfortunately, you have to be completely ignorant of economics to think like that.
Yeah, apparently. So,
yes.
Alan Greenspan famously talked about the Fed maintaining a certain level, minimum necessary level of worker insecurity as a way to stop what he called wage inflation. In other words, whenever the economy would start getting really good, Greenspan, as Fed chief, would crank up interest rates and slow down the economy, which would throw more people out of work, so it would stop wage inflation, in quotes. It looks like over the last few years, Jerome Powell has said inflation is no longer our top priority. The law that created the Fed said you have to equally consider inflation and unemployment, and that Powell is leading the Fed toward unemployment, toward lowering unemployment, perhaps at the risk of inflation, but who knows? How does employment tie into a strong or weak dollar, and the Fed policy there? We have about a minute, by the way.
Yeah, here's the basic way it does. When you have a weak dollar, which is what we have now, when you have a weak dollar, imports go up in price, in dollar price. And the United States is now so dependent on the rest of the world that unfortunately we can't switch away from many of the things we import just because the price goes up. So here's the irony. The weak dollar makes imported goods go up in price. And when you have other forces pushing towards an inflation, then a weak dollar adds to the inflationary pressures. And I think what you're going to see, if things don't change in the next few weeks, is a real surge of inflation, which will then force Mr. Powell to go ahead and raise interest rates, which makes everybody in the stock market quake, and which could put a big brake on any recovery in the United States, and that would mean rising, not falling, unemployment.
Amazing, amazing. It's all how interrelated it all is. Professor Richard Wolff, thanks so much for dropping by today, sir.
My pleasure, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. democracyatwork.info. His most recent book, The Sickness is the System. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolff. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. It is 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where smart people get their news. We'll be right back. Stick around. And welcome back. Don in Worthington, Ohio. Hey, Don, hey, thanks for watching us on Twitter Live. And what's on your mind?
In your rant today, you mentioned that the January 6th Commission is dead, at least with...
It's unlikely, let's say. I don't think it's quite dead yet, but it's pretty unlikely. Go ahead.
Okay, and another part is Freddie DeBoer has a column that he says that politics in the United States, and I can't pronounce the word, Kerfuru or something like that. It's the word that says a wrestling match is a game in which the participants know that it's decided ahead of time, but then it goes on. In other words, what he's saying is the American public looks at politics like it's a wrestling match.
I think
there's
some truth to that, you know, and the kind of secondary truth that I think most people know or intuit is that whichever candidate has the most money and spends the most money or has the most support from people or entities or organizations that have a lot of money, typically is the candidate who wins elections. And not necessarily the candidate with the best ideas or that sort of thing, but the candidate with the most money. And, you know, which is one of the reasons why I think that you could properly define America as, you know, part democracy, part oligarchy. But I don't know if I'm speaking to the point you're trying to make or the question you were asking, Don.
Well, I guess the point is, from our perspective, we see this as possibly the end of democracy. We're on the brink of the end of democracy. But is the general public thinking this is just a wrestling match?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know, just sit back and let them fight it out.
Yeah, you know, it's entirely possible, and that's how our media generally deals with these kinds of political debates. So, you know, it's entirely possible. Don, thank you for the call. David in Monterey, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, thank you. Here, I got a little thing written out here. It says, years of a very successful propaganda machine has brought us Trump and where the Republican Party is today.
Right.
Anything that goes against that propaganda is a lie or false news. In that, all my family that believes in that propaganda slowly cut me out. We live in an echo chamber. Even my social network has become an echo chamber, which is a real problem. We don't want to live in an echo chamber. We want to hear different ideas, points of views. We want to.
This is the social media algorithms at work.
Yes, and that is the real thing. And my family, that the real Trump supporters and friends, and I'm an anti-war person. The people that are for those wars have all cut me off to live in their little echo chamber, and everything else is a lie. No matter what, it's a real problem here in America.
I'm so sorry to hear that, David. That's got to be just so disheartening.
Well, yeah. Well, most of my family are not that right wing, so it's not. It's a few.
So it's just some of them. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
David, thank you for the call. Thanks for, and I think your perceptions are straight on, spot on. We'll be right back, 20 minutes past the hour, back in 1 minute. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Ask a boomer what it was like going to college back in the 60s and 70s and whether they had to go into debt to do it. And odds are they'll tell you that they not only didn't have to go into debt, in fact, college was free in California until Ronald Reagan became governor. Not only did they not have to go into debt, but you could pretty much work your way through college just with a part-time job. That is very much no longer the case. Only 8% of millennials and Gen Xers have never had a student loan. This is a crushing burden on these two generations, and it's time to clean it up. And when Americans were asked, what do you think? Should we just wipe the slate clean? Should we get rid of all this student debt? 60% of Americans said yes. And then, of course, the corollary to that would be, and then let's make college free, at least state colleges and community colleges. There's a whole video about this over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. You can check it out there. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And there is I'm going to pick up your phone calls here in just a minute or three, but I wanted to share with you this new coronavirus story that is very troubling. I mean, this is the reason why, or one of the reasons why it is so destructive that right-wing media, Fox News, the Republican Party, the Trump faction in the Republican Party basically are spreading this idea that you shouldn't get vaccinated, or spreading these bizarre stories that people who are vaccinated are somehow shedding viruses or particles or something, which is a complete lie. It's complete nonsense. Or that, the vaccine is going to change your DNA or turn you into a zombie or something like that. It's these variants. There is a new variant. This one has appeared. Multiple travelers, this from Nature.com, Nature magazine, the science magazine. A piece by Smitri Malapalli. Multiple travelers carried a new coronavirus variant from Central Africa to Europe, where it has now spread to at least a dozen countries. It's called B1620. It was first detected in Lithuania, and then they started doing genomic analysis across Europe and discovered it in several European samples and found that it had been circulating as early as February. And is now present in France, Belgium, and other European countries. They found 6 people living in the Central African Republic near the Cameroonian border, and 7 people in Europe who had recently returned from Cameroon who were carrying this variant. We know that the variant coming out of India is more contagious than any of the other variants and is more deadly than any of the other variants. And that is producing a real problem in India, which I'll get to in just a moment. This variant appears to be at least equally contagious and deadly, and perhaps more so. We need to stop this virus. We need to stop it in the United States. We need to stop it worldwide, and that means getting the planet vaccinated. And that means, pushing up and speeding up this TIPS program. And here's where the thing in India is so problematic. There is a fungus. It is called mucormycosis, or black fungus, is the name of it. Mucormycetes is the actual name of the organism. And this black fungus typically only affects people who are immune compromised, like people who have AIDS or people who are on high levels of drugs that suppress the immune system. It is ravaging the hospital wards in India where they are treating patients with COVID, because the principal treatment for COVID nowadays, the main thing that they've learned that prevents people from just melting down and dying, is giving people steroids, is shutting down their immune system, because it's the immune response to the virus that is doing so much of the damage in the body. And so they put people on steroids, and that makes them vulnerable to fungal infections. And we're not talking athlete's foot here. This is something where literally, when you get this, or when people get this is so far confined to India, people get this, it typically invades the eyes and the teeth and the gums, and people have to have their eyes removed and their lower jaws removed when they get this fungus. And 50% of the people who get this fungus die within a few days. I mean, that's how deadly this is. And now you have 3 states in India that have declared black fungus emergencies, Rajasthan and Telangana. And Maharashtra state alone has reported several thousand cases of this black fungus among people who are being treated for COVID. And, you know, at the moment, this is confined to India. And now they're starting to run out of steroids, which might be a mixed blessing. More people will die from COVID. Fewer people are going to get the black fungus. I mean, we've got to stop this thing. We've got, and the reason that they're using so many, there's so much steroid use on this in India, is because the principal variant now, this Indian variant, is just ripping across the subcontinent, and it is more deadly, and it is more contagious than even the British variant, the B117, that is currently ripping through parts of the United States. And by the way, it's not going to be the last one. So, I mean, just as a simple, logical, thoughtful public health measure, pushing back on the crazy, pushing back on Republicans who are trying to politicize a damn virus, and trying to sabotage Joe Biden's efforts for political purposes. You know, so that they can have, let's have another 500,000 Americans die so we can say, oh, Trump wasn't so bad. Look at how many died when Biden was president. That's amazing. Or is it people, is the Republican Party vying to win the Darwin Awards, right? Too stupid to live. I don't know. We'll pick up your thoughts on that and everything else we've been talking about right after the break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Talk media for the sane among us. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with your calls right after this.
Our book today is Microtrends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, The Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns in change and microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll. The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choice is leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies, which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations who in their own youth, led a rebellion, have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming. But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, but which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now microtrends squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass-produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com about conspiracy theories. Abby Richards came up with a kind of a hierarchy of conspiracies, maybe a variation on the old Maslow hierarchy. And it goes from actual conspiracies to maybe this was a conspiracy, maybe not, we have questions, to this is kind of crazy stuff, but who knows, flying saucers, for example, to actual science denial, conspiracy theories that actually serve to promote the interests of a particular industry or wealthy individuals, to the totally crazy stuff, the flat earth, the reptilian overlords and all that kind of thing, conspiracy theories that can do tremendous damage. And, one of those being one of the conspiracy theories that, brought two Republicans into Congress this year. So anyhow, I lay the whole thing out with a new video for our supporters over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and just apropos of what has happened to the Republican Party. Steve Bannon, who is the producer for Rachel Maddow's program, and has been a guest on this program. He's got he wrote a book. I don't know, a few months ago, Steve was on. I'm sorry, I don't recall the title of the book, but it was an excellent book. And it was a fascinating conversation we had with him. He wrote a piece over at the Maddow blog where he's like asking the question, where are the mainstream Republicans? Where are these middle-of-the-road Republicans? Where are the rational, sane, not absolutely bat guano nuts Republicans? Who are they? And as far as he can tell, there's a very small number of them. There are about 10 of them. 10 Republican lawmakers who both voted to create the January 6th Commission and to certify the results of the 2020 election. And that's Liz Cheney of Wyoming, Anthony Gonzalez of Ohio, Jamie Herrera Butler of Washington State, John Katko of New York, Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, Peter Meyer of Michigan, Dan Newhouse of Washington State, Fred Upton of Michigan, and David Valladio of California. And that's it. And, when you compare, 10 out of all the Republicans, that's about 4% of the Republican Party are the moderates. I mean, do we really think that they're going to, take their party back? I don't know. I think it's getting fascinating. It's getting really fascinating. Charles in Los Angeles. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind?
Bipartisanship. I think the way that it's going to work is with the public, not in Congress. Republicans have already stated that they're against anything Democrats want to do. That's what McConnell said. He's just 100% looking at getting back the House and the Senate. So I think Democrats need to just concentrate on things that they think is going to help the public in general, and that'll get more Republicans to vote for Democrats. That's what happened in Georgia. They got Republicans to vote for the 2 Georgia senators.
Yeah, I agree. Prove that you can make government work for people, and that this lie that Ronald Reagan told in his inaugural address in January 20th, 1981, where he said government is not the solution to your problem, it's the cause of your problem, that lie is a lie. And government can do good things, and assuming that it's being run by people with good intentions who are not beholden to some cranky petro-billionaires. I'm with you, Charles. I think you nailed it. Thank you very much for the call. Lewis in Norristown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Lewis, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I heard you earlier talking about how to bring the Republican Party back from, basically it's
insanity,
lunacy. Yeah. And so I have an idea. Public shaming.
How so?
You get reporters to ask them constantly, hey, how come you do every single thing that Trump asks you to do? If
they're
Trump
not ashamed of that, Lewis.
Would you? No, but the thing is, I feel like if they did it eventually and just kept at it, eventually they would, because anybody would get tired of that, and eventually they would grow to resent Trump more, and eventually they'll rebel against Trump.
Yeah, maybe. I do think public accountability, whether it turns into shaming or whether they interpret it as such, is a really important step. So I think you're onto something, Lewis. Thank you very much for that. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good.
Great. I think someone had mentioned all the virus, COVID virus, would fit in a Coke can. but it would take 6 swimming pools of vaccine in order to cure the earth of it. And anyway, regarding the immoral filibuster, which I don't know why it still exists. I don't know if you ever did a deep dive into Cato the Younger, who was revered by Washington, the Roman politician.
Yes.
Hello?
I know who you're talking about, but no, I've never done a deep dive into Cato the Younger.
Well, he was he really followed the Stoic, and when he was a kid, a politician came to their house and got everybody to support him for his election, and Cato wouldn't. So he hung Cato out by his feet out the window, and he still wouldn't support him when he was 6. Anyway, that was the life he led. He was a Stoic. But and in Roman law, that the Senate's business was from sun up to sundown. No business could be done after sundown. So he did the first filibuster, I guess, when he started talking about everything and reading everything to keep the Senate from voting to allow Julius Caesar to return to Rome to cross the Rubicon.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he did that, but it was the next day they passed it.
Yeah.
But anyway, they have rules that you can get around the filibuster for economic means.
Right.
But
That's called reconciliation. Yeah.
Right. But nothing for civil rights or human needs. Why does money take precedent? I don't.
Well,
understand.
this is an argument, Bill, that is being made right now by the ACLU has made this argument. Ben Jealous with People for the American Way shared this argument on this program a couple of weeks ago, that if we're going to allow an exception to the filibuster for things that are economic, and if we're going to allow an exception on the assumption that economic things are necessary, right? You've got to spend money to make the country work. So it's necessary to the functioning of a democracy. And if we're going to allow exceptions to the filibuster for the appointment of federal judges, and of course, Mitch McConnell blew up the filibuster for Supreme Court justices so that he could get through Brett Kavanaugh and company. If we're going to do that, we should also allow an exception to the filibuster, and it should fit within the same rationale for anything that substantially enhances democracy in the United States.
Well,
and therefore, H.R. 1 should fall into that category and should be exempt from the filibuster. Now, I doubt the Senate parliamentarian will agree, but I think it's a great argument.
Well, the original idea behind it was to give the minority side a last chance to make their case before they voted, not to run out the clock and stop the vote all the way. And they could go back to that. That's fine. Give them another chance to,
this is the Jimmy Stewart filibuster that I'm in favor of.
Right. Yeah, something like that. But one other thing, Tom, if they make abortion illegal, isn't it become federal law across the country? How could states, if they consider it to be murder on their own, not allow abortion if it's federally considered murder?
Yeah. Well, this is where it gets real interesting, because because the Supreme Court has chosen to take this case, this Mississippi anti-abortion law case, which I think bars abortion after 13 weeks. I could be wrong, but it's in that neighborhood. When a lot of women don't even realize that they're pregnant.
Exactly.
And if they rule in favor of Mississippi, if they decide to basically blow up Roe v. Wade and say, it's up to the states, which is how it used to be, by the way, then what you're going to end up with is you're going to have some states, mostly the blue states, where abortion is available and legal and safe. And you're going to have other states where abortion is very, very difficult. And we're sort of there right now. I mean, there are states where there's only one abortion clinic in an entire state. There's multiple states where that's the case. And women, have to travel in some cases for days, for many, many hours to get an abortion. And then sometimes they have to wait for days. There's like this waiting period. Frankly, I think we should use those same laws, those model anti-abortion laws that require a woman to watch a video, to be informed about the consequences of the abortion, to wait a 3-day cooling down period. All that stuff should be applied to buying guns, number one. But number two, Carlos Chapman, who is a law professor at Washington Lee University, adds, so what's going to happen is you're going to have this patchwork quilt across the United States. So then it's going to get real interesting. She says if a fetus is a person at 6 weeks pregnant, which is what some of these laws argue, is that when child support starts? Is that when a woman can demand child support from the father of the child, especially if they're not married or living together? Is that also when, if a woman is in this country without documentation and she's pregnant, at that point you can't deport her because she's carrying a U.S. citizen? Is that is that the point where if she buys life insurance on her 6-week fetus and has a miscarriage, which is 1 in 4 pregnancies, can she collect $1 million from the insurance company? I mean, it gets real interesting. There's all these weird questions about, if you're going to grant personhood to fetuses. Bill, thanks for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Past the hour, back with more of the news of the day and your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. And welcome back. Peggy in Boise, Idaho. Hey, Peggy, thanks for waiting so long. I'm sorry about that. What's on your mind today?
No, that's fine. Okay, first thing I want to tell you is I just want to thank you for the number of years you've been on the radio, and you absolutely got me through the George W. Bush administration.
Oh, thank you.
When I was going crazy then.
It's
anyway,
therapy for me too, Peggy. So, anyhow, what's up?
Well, okay, what I'm calling about is in defense of Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
It was not Idahoans that came up with this idea to enlarge the state.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when it was on the news, one of the news televisions did a survey, and 100% of people who responded said, no, we did not want to change our borders.
Really?
We didn't like it. Yes. And then when it went in front of the legislature, the first thing the legislature asked them was like, okay, what kind of infrastructure do you have that you want us to take on in expense? How many prisons do you have that you now want Idahoans to pay for? And it was absolutely thrown out.
Interesting.
Idaho is a very conservative state, and so a lot of times when you throw out these kinds of stories, it attracts more conservatives into Idaho. And it's hard enough being a liberal as it is. So
yeah. It's got to be a tough one for you, Peggy.
Not everybody in Idaho thinks that way.
But Boise is the largest town in Idaho, isn't it?
That's correct.
Is there a fairly substantial contingent of Democrats in Boise?
Well, our mayor is she's a Democrat.
Oh, that's a good sign.
And there is, as it grows, it's interesting because a lot of the people that move here, especially if they're from California, they know that they're going to get resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the first thing out of their mouth is that they'll tell us, I'm here from California, but it's okay, I'm a conservative. I'm not a liberal, so you can take me in. And I know.
And that doesn't fly so well in Boise, but it does in the rest of the state, right?
Well, yes, it is. It's a very rural state.
Yeah.
And it's so.
What's the population of Idaho?
We have a large Mormon population in Idaho that is very conservative.
Yeah.
But at one time when I moved here, Idaho was really a purple state. Mm-hmm. In other words, you had to really look at the background of whoever you were voting for,
right?
Because you couldn't depend on somebody that was just a good Republican or good Democrat on that. But
That's
then talk radio came and it became hardcore.
See, I think that's the major cancer that has infected this country is 1,500 right-wing radio stations. Politically, explicitly right-wing radio stations, and another 500 or so religious stations that have become right-wing religious stations. And I've just been banging my head against the wall for years now, trying to convince the Democratic Party and the wealthy people, you know, who are supporters of the Democratic Party, that this is something they need to pay attention to. Peggy, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate the call.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, great talking with you. And thank you for listening to us there in Boise, Idaho, in the Thom Hartmann app. We will be right back 1 minute from now. I will be back with you, picking up your phone calls. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So with some fancy footwork math, you can take the GDP of the United States, the productivity, the amount of wealth that is produced, or goods and services that are produced every year by American workers, and divide it by the number of workers, and what you get is that the average worker in America is producing about $75 an hour worth of value for their employer. And the minimum wage pays them about 10% of that value. Now, back in 1950, the minimum wage paid 30% of the value of the productivity that the average worker is producing for their employer. If we took the minimum wage up to $15 an hour tomorrow, it would still be in the neighborhood of 20%. So there's a strong case for increasing the minimum wage based on history. I lay this all out in the new video that we have just for our people who are supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Renee in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Renee, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. You do a great job, but I'm frustrated with the men in the audience. What I want you all to understand is that women do not have abortions for amusement. Now, the way that we can use as another solution to this problem, any man that's accused of impregnating a woman should be sterilized. Let's work with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I bet you guys then will want that woman to have a choice.
I'm with you. And like I've been saying this for years. If men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament.
You guys just don't have the spirit to do it. That's the reason why God put us here to help you.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Renee, excellent. Thank you so much. That was just a wonderful punctuation mark to that last call. Last issue. Sean in Davenport, Iowa. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I love how you just get after it every day of the work week. And I also thoroughly enjoy all of your hidden history books. I just wrapped up the oligarchy one, and earlier in today's segment, you had a caller in calling about the 7 counties here in Oregon and the greater Idaho. It's kind of funny how when the conservatives lose federal elections, like go back to McCain-Obama, Texas wanted to secede from the Union,
right?
You know, and then when they're in charge of the federal government, like Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, and Trump, they rub it down our throats for 4 years, waving their flags, wearing their hats. You know, the lunatic fringe out there is just crazy. But you touched on this in your oligarchy book about the next civil war that's kind of brewing. And I think they want to succeed or move state lines and do this because they just don't want to be a part of democracy and or are trying to tax evade their property taxes because Oregon is a high tax state. I'm sure Idaho's cheaper, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a bit counterproductive. You know, make up your minds, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you. It is, spot on. And I'm not sure that logic plays into this. I think that this is a naked appeal to tribalism. And, you know, essentially, in this case, rural tribalism. It's us against those big cities. And by the way, have you noticed the kind of people who live in those big cities? You know, you've got people of color and you've got white liberals. Oh, my God. And, and the thing that's driving the process, frankly, in my opinion, is right-wing media, Sean.
Yeah, you're right. I live in a tiny town in Iowa, very rural, okay? And I've been the chairperson with platform committees and all sorts of things. I've been doing the caucuses for the last couple of rounds in my township. And the amount of Democrats is slowly dissipating. Bernie had the best youth come out back in 2016, and then nothing this past time. So it's like, what's going on? It's just like, it's mind-boggling.
Well, I think things might get better, Sean, because I think that that Bernie base, that young Bernie base that Bernie brought out in 2016, may not have shown up in big numbers in 2020 for Joe Biden, because this is widespread perception among Democratic voters, including millennials, that Joe Biden was just, another centrist Democrat. It would be another Bill Clinton administration. And instead, Joe Biden has turned into a screaming progressive. And so I suspect those folks are going to show up in 2022. Yes, to your suggestion.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Could you write a hidden history on the separation of church and state? That'd be perfect. That'd get these evangelicals mind-boggled about the history of the separation of church and state. That's a suggestion. Let that ponder. I love you, Tom. Thank you for the phone call.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Sean. Yeah, that's a great idea. The hidden history of the separation of church and state. That is an absolutely brilliant idea. Let's see. We still have a minute, right, Sean? Yeah. Okay. Amy in Trinville, Oregon. Hey, Amy, you have the last minute of the hour. What's up?
Hi. We recently had a race come through town here, the America's Toughest Race Expedition Oregon, and it was really exciting, and a lot of people came, and we had some international people, and it was reported locally here that some of the people that had come up from Ecuador were so excited because they were able to get their COVID shots while they were in our town, because we have such an oversupply because our town is so red that we're not using all of our shots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was a running race, the kind where people show up and they run?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's remarkable that people were showing up from other countries in, where is Trinville? I've never been there.
Prineville.
Oh, it's Prineville.
20 miles east of Redmond. So,
yeah, that is red country, or kind of rural country. That's fascinating. Yeah, but you've got lots and lots of vaccines. Sean Brake.
Yes.
Amy, thanks a lot for that. Thanks for the story. That's a marvelous one. We'll be back in just a moment. We're going to check in with Michael Mann about the state of our climate, and then we'll continue our conversations after that. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today is Microtrends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, the Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns in change and microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll. The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choice is leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies, which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations who in their own youth led a rebellion have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming. But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, but which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now Microtrends Squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, Microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass-produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. On the line with us is Dr. Michael Mann, the Distinguished Professor of Meteorology, the Director of the Earth Systems Science Center at Penn State University, member of the National Academy of Sciences, recipient of the Tyler Prize, author of numerous books, including The Madhouse Effect, and most recently, The New Climate War. MichaelMann.net is the website. The Twitter handle is Michael E. Mann. And by the way, Dr. Mann, I've been digging into The New Climate War. This is an absolutely brilliant book, a very serious, thoughtful book. Thank you for it. Welcome back to the program. And I'm reading this story, Climate Change Makes Zombie Fires More Common, as if drought, flooding, extreme hurricanes, and deadly heat waves weren't enough. Climate change could make zombie fires more common. Tell me about these fires in the Arctic. They're calling zombie fires that just never go out.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's great to be with you, my friend. And this is one of the manifestations of human-caused climate change. We're seeing wildfires from the Amazon all the way up into the Arctic. It's making the planet warmer, drier in many locations. You put that together, heat, drought, you get wildfires. And even up in the Arctic, where they have seen very warm, very dry conditions in recent summers. And there is a huge amount of material in these environments, dead organic matter, peat bogs. There is lots of material there to burn. And so once you do get those fires going, there's just a lot of material to keep them going for some time. And hence, yes, climate change is indeed creating a zombie apocalypse. That is to say, zombie wildfires up in the Arctic.
And these wildfires are also converting stored carbon, forests, and I guess in many cases peat and permafrost, into atmospheric carbon, right?
That's true. And that happened down in Australia, where I was doing a sabbatical last year during what they now call the Black Summer, this summer where these bushfires blanketed the continent. Australia, during those bushfires, put more carbon into the atmosphere through those fires. In fact, more than 2 times as much carbon from those fires as all of fossil fuel burning for that entire year in Australia. And so this is adding carbon to the atmosphere. We think the Amazon, which has historically been a sink, drawing up carbon, burying it in old-growth forests and root systems beneath. That carbon is starting to be released. The Amazon could become a source of carbon within a decade or two if we continue on this road. So it's not a runaway warming scenario, as some have feared, but it will add to the warming. And it does sort of suggest that we may well find ourselves at the upper end of the projections of future carbon levels if we don't act dramatically now.
Yeah. And now, with regard to the melting Arctic ice cover, I'm reading that there's actually the possibility. I mean, many of the news stories have been, you know, all the oil companies and all the big countries, in particular the United States and Russia, are competing for the Arctic because, you know, they can drill fossil fuels out of the region. but there's also a rare cooperative note going into an Arctic meeting between us and Russia. Any word on this?
Yeah, so there's this Arctic Council that was set up a number of years ago to bring together countries that border the Arctic and have an interest in maintaining the health of that environment. And whether you're Russia, whether you're North America, Canada, the United States, Finland, the Nordic countries, we all, have a stake in what happens there. And in many respects, when it comes to what's happening in the Arctic, it's happening even faster than our models projected. The sea ice is disappearing faster, as you note, leads to all sorts of complications. First of all, it opens up the Arctic Ocean for oil drilling. We drill more fossil fuels, burn more of them. We contribute to the warming. Moreover, it creates a national security, a conflict issue, because pretty soon you have competition between different countries neighboring the Arctic for those drilling rights and for efforts to defend these new coastlines from a defense standpoint, from a military standpoint. And so it's leading to all sorts of complications. And it's a reminder that uncertainty isn't our friend. In many respects, the impacts are playing out faster than we expected them to, with dire consequences.
Is there any new research on the clathrate gun hypothesis? This theory that there are frozen methane deposits off the coasts of all the continents, and there's a pile of it in the Arctic, and that if this stuff starts melting rapidly as a consequence of warming waters, that it could, tip into a runaway cycle. Do we have any idea how much warming it would take to trigger something like that? Apparently, that happened toward the tail end of the beginning of the Permian extinction.
That's right. There are periods in the deep geological past where something like that happened. Right now, we're not anywhere close to that. Right now, for example, the Arctic isn't as warm as it probably was during the end of the previous ice age, about 100,000 years ago. We're in that neighborhood. There was no runaway methane warming that precipitated from that event. If we burn every fossil fuel we can find, if we continue with this profligate sort of burning reliance on fossil fuels and elevate CO2 concentrations to 2 or 3 times pre-industrial levels, pretty soon we probably, soon if we were to do that, we would get into that regime where we start to we set in motion some of these large feedbacks. Right now, there's no evidence that that's happening. We're measuring methane pretty carefully. It is increasing, but we're fairly certain based on the isotopic signature. We can look at the carbon atoms in the methane that's accumulating in the atmosphere, and the isotope of carbon tells us where that methane's coming from. Thus far, the methane that is showing up in the atmosphere appears to be coming largely from fossil fuel extraction, from natural gas, from fracking. And so far, the methane increase is actually something we can control if we do something about our continued extraction of fossil fuels.
That's good news and reassuring. California is heading toward another brutal wildfire season. Here in Oregon, where this state is in, I saw an article a couple of days ago suggesting that this might be the worst drought in the history of the state. We had horrible wildfires last year where for a week or two, Louise and I could hardly breathe. How much worse is this going to get?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of bad news here. If you're in Oregon, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, we actually just published a study that was publicized today in one of the journals of the American Geophysical Union called Earth's Future, where we look at the climate model projections and their implications for heat stress in North America. And it combines the warming and the more humid air, the more humid the air, the more heat stress, and changes in population. And the Pacific Northwest is one of the hot spots where we expect to see more than a doubling of heat stress by the end of the century if we continue with business as usual. On the other hand, if we act now dramatically, we can prevent heat stress from getting significantly worse. So the future, to a large extent, is still in our hands. But, hey, in the West, we've seen unprecedented heat and drought and wildfires. Back in the East, we've seen huge flooding events. This is dangerous climate change. It's arrived by some measure, and the question is, how bad are we willing to let it get?
Yeah, it's absolutely here. Michael, we just have 30 seconds. I understand the world's largest iceberg just broke off in Antarctica. What's the meaning of this?
Yeah, well, we've seen a number of those over the last decade or so. The Larsen Ice Shelf B, larger than the state of Rhode Island, broke off in 2003. And since then, we've seen these ice shelves begin to disintegrate. And that's a cause for worry. It means we are destabilizing the Antarctic ice sheet. And if we do destabilize those ice shelves, then that inland ice can start to flow into the ocean. And that's where we really start to see sea level rise, if we start melting the Antarctic ice sheet, if it disintegrates. So we still have time, hopefully, to prevent that.
Yeah, that's where the real crisis, or a real crisis, since so much of the human population lives, within 100 feet of sea level or so. Dr. Michael Mann, his most recent book, The New Climate War, really worth checking out. Michael E. Mann on Twitter, michaelmann.net on the internet. Dr. Mann, thanks so much for dropping by. It's great to see you again, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stick around. It's 15 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Jake in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jake, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up?
Good morning, Mr. Tom. I know you're a big fan of Thomas Jefferson, and he who wrote the preamble to the Constitution, and in it he uses the term liberty. And I've heard that term liberty, I've read it in several places that says, in effect, that's referring to financial freedom for the very first three words of the Constitution itself, we the people. Is there any truth to that? And can you refer to other writings of Thomas Jefferson where he speaks to that particular liberty is really, keeps us necessitous people from being slaves to the oligarchs?
Right. There is an interesting dialogue between Jefferson and Adams, both former presidents when they were both old men, where Jefferson says, I am not one to rely on the rich for the future and confidence of our country. And Adams comes back going, no, in fact, the rich are the ones who are usually causing the problems. But what has happened is that the billionaires, in particular this group of billionaires associated with the Koch network, have, since the 1970s largely, but particularly since 1980, since David Koch ran for vice president on the Libertarian platform unsuccessfully, and then basically they moved in and took over the Republican Party. These think tanks associated with these billionaires, Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, there's a whole bunch of them. They have been conflating the word liberty with economics, as if the only kind of liberty that is of any consequence is if billionaires no longer have to pay taxes. That's really, and if there's no regulation on government, on government regulation on business activities. And that definition of liberty has been largely picked up and adopted by the Republican Party. Is that what you're talking about, Jake?
That and the we the people. Did Thomas Jefferson ever say we the people are the rulers of the country and not the oligarchs?
Oh yeah, repeatedly. And it's the first three words not just of the Constitution but also of the Declaration of Independence, I believe. No, or maybe the Declaration is when in the course of human events. I'd have to go back and look. But it's certainly the first three words of the Constitution, which Jefferson did not write, by the way. He was in France when that was written.
Really?
Yeah, the guy who supervised that was Jefferson's protege, James Madison, who was in Philadelphia with, I think it was 57 other people who put together the Constitution. But the preamble to the Constitution does a really good job. It defines explicitly 6 and implicitly 7 areas where the government should be paying attention and doing things specifically, to help us all out. And it's in fact, if I can find the preamble, to make a more perfect union. In other words, to bring us all together, to establish justice, I think that's self-explanatory. To ensure domestic tranquility, in other words, to keep peace in America. And that's not police power. That's, making things work. Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, which was kind of something they borrowed from the Iroquois. So you nailed it, Jake. Jake, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So the Republican Party has sold themselves all the way back to the 60s, really, as the serious party. We're the party of issues. We take stuff seriously. We have serious policy analysis. We have serious constitutional analysis. We are serious about the economy. We have all these think tanks, Heritage and Competitive Enterprise and Cato, and we've got the Federalist Society finding serious judges that we can put on the federal bench, and in response to 4 dead Americans, they got real serious. 5 House committees, 2 Senate committees. They created a separate House Select Committee for 4 dead Americans. That was Benghazi. Thousands of hours of testimony. The Secretary of State testifying for 8 hours straight. But when 5 people die at the Capitol, not so much. Got a new video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple things I wanted to bring to your attention, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. The first is a black homeowner. This is just absolutely extraordinary. Charlotte Duffy is her name, and because her name is not a name that, quote, sounds like a black name, and you can make whatever you want out of that, but it's a name that could be any race, right, or at least could be white or black. I presumably could be any race. Come on. She bought this house in Indianapolis, in an historic black area that is going through kind of a gentrification, and she bought it for $100,000 back in 2017. And there was a similar home in the neighborhood that was valued at $198,000, almost twice as much. And she thought, geez, if my home is worth more, I can, refinance it and get some extra money that she had plans for. So she called an appraiser. The appraiser came in, looked at the house, and came back and said, it's worth $125,000. And she said, well, I know it's worth more than that. So she went to a different lender who sent a different appraiser, and that appraiser said, it's worth $110,000. Now keep in mind, this is a house that she bought for $100,000 in 2017, but housing values are going up rapidly in this neighborhood. So she borrowed a friend's husband who was white, and she took all the pictures out of the house that showed black family members, and anything that might even remotely indicate that a black person lived in this house, and had her best friend's white husband come over and be in the house as if he was her husband when the appraiser showed up. So the third lender that she went to sent in an appraiser, same house, nothing's changed, just all the black knickknacks are gone, or pictures. That appraisal came back at $259,000. It's amazing. We think redlining is gone. Well, this isn't really redlining. This is, this is just plain old, straight up. These are, kind of the assumptions that are built in. This is what's called structural racism. Now, the first 2 appraisers, we know their names and we know the companies associated with them. They're in the news story. They're in the news. You can find them easily. They're both insisting that they're not racist and that their judgment on the value of her home had nothing to do with her race. But, I mean, you know, boy howdy, look at how this worked out. And I am guessing that sort of like, you know, the cell phones people have are now starting to show us in a big way how police treat black people, that we're going to start seeing, if you want to call this a sting operation or however you want to define it or explain it, we're going to start seeing more and more of these kind of things happening in the United States. I think that'll be a good thing. We need to start flushing the racism out of all of our systems. Speaking of racism, one of Donald Trump, you know, he kicked off his campaign by talking about Mexicans as rapists and murderers. And then, of course, he and Stephen Miller and, you know, his various directors of Homeland Security and ICE and Customs and Border Patrol just started tearing children from their families. Well, NBC News is reporting that they've located an additional 54 parents, the parents for an additional 54 children, just in the last month. This is great news. But that means that, because there was 445 homeless children, you know, parentless children, as a result of this brutal Trump-Miller program, and or Trump-Pence program. Mike Pence was gung-ho for it, too. We're down to 391 children now for whom we have no idea where their parents are. And, in fact, 227 of those children, there is no idea. Nobody has any idea where their parents are. There are another 100 where they know that their parents are somewhere in the United States, but they don't know where because they've lost the information or it was never kept track of by the Trump administration in the first place because, you know, frankly, they didn't intend to ever reunite these kids with their parents. This was just, you know, gleeful torture of brown children by racists like Donald Trump, Mike Pence, and Stephen Miller. For 14 of these kids, I mean, they know that their parents are in the United States. They have literally no contact information whatsoever. But again, 227 children out of the 391 for whom we just don't even have a clue. There's a whole bunch of pro bono lawyers, lawyers who are working for free, looking for these parents all over the country. If you know of any, let them know. It's fairly easy to track down the lawyers who are doing this. You can just plug it into DuckDuckGo, into a search machine. So, back with your calls and your thoughts on the news of the day right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stick around.
Our book today is Microtrends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, The Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns and change and microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll. The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choice is leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations who in their own youth led a rebellion have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming. But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, but which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now microtrends squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass-produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
In addition to the free newsletter that we have over at ThomHartmann.com, which gives you
literally a link to every story or article I've talked about throughout the day, every day, comes into your email box every day. There's no charge. In addition to that, and my daily rants, which are free of advertising and free of charge over at HartmannReport.com. We also produce a weekly video. This week's video is about how power companies around the country, for-profit power companies 100% of the time, these power companies around the country are making it harder and harder and more expensive for people to install solar in their homes. All kinds of ways of trying to block people from doing this. And increasingly, they're getting support from Republican politicians, both at the local and the state level. It's something that we really need to know about, we need to be paying attention to, and we need to be aggressively pushing back on. You can check it out over at thomhartmann.com and at hartmannreport.com. And welcome back. Picking up your phone calls here. And Jane in, hang on just a second, Jane. I got to push the right button here. Jane in how do you say that town in Wisconsin, Jane?
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can. How do you say the name of your town?
Okay, Oconomowoc.
Oconomowoc. Okay, I like it.
Yeah, so, halfway between Milwaukee and Madison.
Okay, so what's up?
Well, you know, it must be something. I just went out and started listening to you for the first time ever, and you spoke right to me. I'm a mom, and I have a son that is into conspiracy theories, and you were talking about vaccinations and all the conspiracy theories.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to change their mind. They are deep-seated, and, you know, any information that I get, what he calls from the main 6 conglomerate media outlets, is fake news. So they think that what they find on 4chan or whatever it is, that's the truth. And right. It's so sad, but it's so prevalent and it's so widespread. These people believe what they hear on this stuff.
Yeah. How old is your son, Jane?
He's 33. Wow. And he is, you know, before, you know, 5-6 years ago, he was a Bernie Sanders, everything, but it's, you know, it fell down the rabbit hole, you know, and everything's a conspiracy, but it's just, I just don't know how we're supposed to change those kinds of minds. I don't know if any of your listeners have ideas, but it's just not about vaccinations. It's about everything.
Yeah.
And you can ask for where'd you get this info? They don't have enough. I can write him things and put all my sites and where it was and the Atlantic, these journalists that are credible. It just goes right over the head because it's mainstream or whatever.
Yeah, I have a friend who has fallen into that rabbit hole. In fact, he called me up about maybe a month ago and just started going off on this rant that was just right out of QAnon.
My son totally fell for the whole QAnon. You know, before the vaccination thing was big, it was all about the cabal and Trump was going to, you know, I don't know what happened to that whole story. That kind of fell by the wayside with Trump sending all these Hollywood elitists to Guantanamo Bay. He believed it.
Yeah, no, it's same with my friend George. I mean, it's just, it's pretty shocking. And I didn't, you know, all I could say to him was, George, I love you. You're a good guy and a good friend, but you're wrong on this. And frankly, I don't want to continue these kinds of conversations. You know, we can talk about our family, we can talk about sports, but I'm not going to debate politics with you because you know, we're living in separate worlds.
Well, they don't, you know, going back and forth. You can't debate with them because. You know, and I've learned that. So, you know, if he sends me something, you know, I say, okay, where'd you get the? It's difficult. It's now I think I'm just up to prayer, and you know, I'm so grateful, thankful he's not like in the hate extremist because I mean he's got these wacky things that are starting to impinge all parts of his life.
Yeah, but that's the next step, Jane, and that's something you might warn him about is that the white supremacists are recruiting inside those pools of people.
I've been researching this for a year and a half now, and it's interesting. I mean, he was raised Christian. He did a lot of mission trips. He went to the 8 parts of Asia and Haiti and Africa and did all this stuff. And he had a lot of time on his hands, and he moved up to the Twin Cities, and he had a lot of time on his hands. And I think, you know, you're alone. You don't know a lot of people, and these people, you get sucked. It's cultish. It's addictive.
Yep. It absolutely
it's all
is.
of that. And you know what's interesting is, this is what my prayer is, that will get him out of it. He's got a lot bigger fight to fight. He's married to a Muslim woman. I was totally on board with that. I totally on board with that. She's a black woman. He's got a son that's going to be a year, and another son. And I said, you've got a different fight to fight against. I mean, he's going to raise 2 black children in Minneapolis, right close to Brooklyn Center. So hopefully, I don't think he'll go to that hate extreme. We went back and forth about Derek Chauvin quite a bit, you know. But anyways, if any of your listeners.
Yeah, we've had this conversation on and off on this program for the better part of 5 years now, you know, since the Trump cult started in a big way, or really 4.5 years. And I have no easy answers, Jane, other than, what I keep hearing from people is one of 2 things happens. Either it completely breaks the relationship, and that's typically what happens when people try to engage in those debates, and it becomes more and more heated and more confrontational, or people do what I did with my friend George and just say,
we don't go there.
Yeah, I love you, but we're not going to go there.
He's got 2 sisters and brother-in-laws that live up there in the Twin Cities by him, and I'm like, I don't even want him to go there. He feels insulted that they think he's a quack, and they question his intellect.
Yeah.
I mean, he can rattle off a lot of quick stuff really fast.
Yeah. No, it's a tough one. Jane, I have to move along to another caller. There's a bunch of people online,
Thanks for listening,
and in fact, the next caller here says that she has a suggestion on how to combat conspiracy theories. So we'll see what she has to say. Jane, thank you for the call. Dawn in Cincinnati, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Dawn, what's on your mind?
Hi. Hey. So I have a suggestion for the woman with the son who is in the conspiracy theories. So if she tells him that the Democrats and Biden know that the only people who aren't taking the vaccine are probably the same people who aren't wearing masks are the conspiracy theorists, and so that it's a big plan for Biden to kind of try to kill off those people, and therefore, because we're all going to be protected, all of us who are wearing our mask and or have the vaccine, leaving the rest of them vulnerable. And then, more votes for Biden if they all die.
Yeah. That this is a nefarious plot by Joe Biden and Anthony Fauci to kill off Republicans.
Exactly.
It might get some traction, Tom. It might. It's not the craziest thing I've heard. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate the call. Larry in L.A. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Hey, you were talking to Professor Wolff about the strong dollar and Trump wanting to have a strong dollar. He did want that in his early years in office, but when the dollar started actually going up, interest rates were also going up at the same time, and they are connected. Yeah. And all those loans that Trump has on that property, he finally got smart and realized, hey, this is costing me money. I think that's the main reason why he started asking the Fed to lower the interest rates. But in general, interest rates and the strong dollar tends to follow when the Democrat is president. The dollar tends to get stronger because the Fed has a tendency to increase the interest rates, and they've done this for the last all of the Democratic presidents for the last 68 years have seen interest rates go up while they were in the White House, and so the dollar has strengthened under them also,
which slows the economy down.
And what happens with the Republicans, though, is they give us a recession, like they've given us 10 recessions in the last 68 years.
Right.
When you have
as
a recession,
you pointed out before, yeah.
Right. So when you have the recession, the Fed then comes in and they lower the interest rates, and making money cheaper, which means the dollar, the value of the dollar also drops. and Americans' buying power drop with that. But and so you end up with a situation where Americans start paying more money for imported goods.
Yeah.
And when the Democrats in the White House, Americans pay less money for imported goods. And all of that stuff is connected to the fact that Republicans have a tendency to lower taxes on the rich. And when they do that, that's basically taking money out of circulation because the rich don't go out and spend that money. And when they don't go out and spend that money, that's when they get.
That's an excellent point. You know, about 70% of our entire $20 trillion budget deficit or debt is the result of the Reagan tax cut, the Bush tax cut, and the Trump tax cut. I mean, it's massive. And fascinating point, Larry. Larry, thank you very much for the call. And thanks for adding to that conversation. It's great. It's always great to hear from you. It's 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. James in Portland, listening on X-Ray FM. Hey, James, what's up?
Okay, Tom. There's something that that hardly anyone talks about, and so I want to bring it out. So according to the United Nations, so you can Google it, cows cause more methane and carbon than cars, planes, trains, and ships combined.
I'm not buying that number. I know that animal agriculture is a massive contributor to global warming, but it's not greater than all transportation combined. But it's huge, and you know, people need to eat less meat. I mean, it's just real simple, straightforward stuff. And we need to change our agricultural practices. We need to stop these you know, giant. There's a CIFOs, I think they're called, the confined animal farm operations. We need to get those. We need to get that stuff under control, and it's just it produces massive amounts of waste. It destroys, you know, the quality of local air. It contaminates and pollutes local water, and by feeding, in particular cows, by feeding them grain, something that evolution didn't prepare them for. They're grass eaters. But they fatten up faster with grain by feeding them grain and by continuously giving them low levels of antibiotics so that the normal bacteria in their gut is all nuked. What we're producing are not only mutant E. coli, like H157, I think it is, the one that causes kidney damage in humans, and you know, severe food poisoning. We're not only producing more and more of that, but we're also producing enormous amounts of methane. And I know that the right wing loves to make jokes about cow farts. But it's real. It's absolutely real. James, thanks for the call. Good talking to you. Ron in Champaign, Illinois. Hey, Ron, thanks for watching us on Twitter. What's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I have an answer to James' question, which is to talk to these conspiracy theorist-type people. First of all, you read Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. And in that book, there's a section called the Baloney Detection Kit, right? So you go through this list. If it doesn't pass the smell test, you throw it out. And you have to offer this book up to people, too. I mean, I'm sure you know the book I'm talking about.
I've not read it. I have read some of Carl Sagan's work, but I'm not familiar with this particular book. What was the title again?
It's a way to teach yourself to be a good skeptic, and I think everybody needs that these days, especially those nutbags out there. So
what's the title of the book?
A Demon Haunted World.
A Demon Haunted World. And the demons presumably are the BS artists and the hustlers.
The demons in our own heads, yes.
Yeah, and people who are saying that there ain't no such thing as evolution and, you know, science is all crazy. And
correctamundo.
Yeah. Fascinating.
That's it.
Fascinating. Have you actually used that with any conspiracy theorists, or are you theorizing?
I actually use it quite a bit. And as a matter of fact, last night I got into a conversation about these UFOs that are all over Twitter these days with somebody last night. And I always try to use this, the tools presented in the book. Huh. That's all they are. Is
Demon
tools.
Haunted World. I'll have to check
You use
it out.
them and try to find your way through the BS.
Sounds
Thanks,
like a
Tom,
plan. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the call, and thanks for watching us on Twitter. We'll be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program right here. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So the Republican Party has sold themselves way back, all the way back to the 60s, really, as the serious party. We're the party of issues. We take stuff seriously. We have serious policy analysis. We have serious constitutional analysis. We are serious about the economy. We have all these think tanks, Heritage and Competitive Enterprise and Cato, and we've got the Federalist Society finding serious judges that we can put on the federal bench, and in response to 4 dead Americans, they got real serious. 5 House committees, 2 Senate committees. They created a separate House Select Committee for 4 dead Americans. That was Benghazi. Thousands of hours of testimony. The Secretary of State testifying for 8 hours straight. But when 5 people die at the Capitol, not so much. Got a new video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Deb in Missoula, Montana. Hey, Deb, what's on your mind today?
I listen to your show, and I so appreciate it. I think that we all need to kind of get off our soapboxes and find a way to find common ground. I did that coming up on 6 years ago when the election didn't go the way I wanted, and I really felt like I was among lots of folks that got caught with their pants down, surprised at what happened. So I like to hear both sides of the view, and so I joined the League of Women Voters. This organization is 100-plus years old. It's nonpartisan, so you don't have to pick a side.
Right.
We have positions on issues. And what we do is our motto is defending democracy and empowering voters. Sometimes I think it's important for people to kind of get away from those unconscious biases that we were raised with, like the mom who's quite upset with her son. Try to understand his point of view, meld your point of view, and find that common ground.
How do you find common ground, though, Deb, with people who are spouting BS and nonsense? I mean, somebody comes along and says the earth is flat. How do you find common ground with that?
I think that you explore why. Tell me, have a conversation, I think you're wrong. I'm trying to convince you of my perspective.
Well, I've seen 3 videos now from doctors with PhDs from major universities who said that the earth is flat. When I walk outside and look around, it looks flat. People have proven now that all these things about a curved earth are just photoshopped. I mean, I know what I know.
And you're right. There are many times you're not going to change people's perspectives, and so you have to move on.
Okay.
Standing and throwing rocks at each other and fighting, poking each other in our chest, it doesn't get anywhere.
Well, that was my what my dad and I actually, when I was a teenager. I mean, at one point, it got so bad that I left home when I was 16, and because we'd have these knockdown, drag-out political battles. He never hit me or anything like that, but I mean, it was really intense. And a couple of years later, when I was around 19, we reconciled and just agreed that for a while we weren't going to discuss politics. And we didn't really start discussing politics again for probably 4 or 5 years. And And then, you know, we figured out how to have debates with each other that didn't turn into, you know, slaughters, you know.
Exactly. Well, and I think you raise a really valid point that, you know, that's an authority figure. It's your father. You're a young person and, you know, coming into your own, and you respect him, but yet you need to, you know, present your point of view.
Yeah.
You know, we all walk through life as a moderator to an extent, whether you're raising children, following the direction of your elders. I kind of came to the realization that, am I a Christian? I think I'm a Christian, maybe. I don't know any different. So am I? I don't know.
Right. Depends on your definition.
And after lots of thought, it's like, you know, I honestly don't know that I am. I'm spiritual, but I don't know about that religion thing. You know, so, you know, appreciate that you're not going to change people's minds. It's up to them to do that. But have the conversation, have an open conversation, and, you know, like you say, find that common ground. At our family reunion, we were super divided. Montana is a very red state. We're just getting redder and more conservative and, in my opinion, more ignorant. But I love my family, and, you know, I'm just not going to let that get between us.
Right.
Because I don't, you know, go to the family reunion to hear political or religious views. I come to see them. They're my family.
Yeah.
We need to have that joinder, you know.
I get it, and I agree with you. Fascinating stuff. Deb, thank you. And thanks for pitching, you know, plugging for the League of Women Voters. It's a really truly great organization, and I'm so glad that you could give them a plug.
Yeah, get involved. Yeah, education.
Thank you.
Seriously, because
thank you, Deb. I got to move along, but thank you. Murray in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Murray, we have about a minute left to the end of the program today. What's up?
Hi, sir. I've been a real estate appraiser for going on 18 years now, and I'm a review appraiser for multiple lenders and all over the country. And I just, it upsets me to hear.
So what do you think happened to this woman who, you know, 2 appraisals, $100,000, gets rid of all the black stuff in the house, suddenly the house is worth $225,000?
Well, I went to the Indianapolis, I guess, Real Estate Association numbers. In that time period, they experienced 13% appreciation, you know.
This is 100%.
Right. Annual appreciation rate of 6.39%.
Right.
So if she bought that house in 2017, she should certainly have some appreciation. But you have no idea what people. I've been in $1 million homes that a year later people have just trashed, let the yard go, leaking roofs.
Well, I don't think that was the case here. I don't think that was the case here. Murray, I got to run, but thank you for the call and the insights. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It wasn't designed that way. It doesn't work that way. And if we're going to hang on to democracy in this country, we have to get involved. That means you too. League of Women Voters, for example, per one of our earlier callers, great place to start. So get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.